The stone was already lit when I put my hand on it. That's the part one always leave out when people ask, because it sounds like I did something, like I knew what I was doing. I didn't. My boot caught a loose heel of rock and I went down sideways, and the only thing between my face and the monolith's base was my left palm, flat and open, and the whole canyon floor shook. But I'm getting ahead of it. Let me start where it matters. I came to Vetha's Landing in the dry season, 38 days after the Tessavar Academic Union packed its drilling platforms and left. They'd been at the excavation site for 4 months. Before them, a Directorate survey fleet spent 6 weeks running every scan in their catalogue and got nothing. And before the Directorate, a man named Varric's son arrived with 200 soldiers and a promise to the Warlord Council that he'd crack the monolith open by solstice. He didn't. He lost 14 pieces of heavy equipment to whatever force field the thing projects when it doesn't want to be touched, and he left in the middle of the night without filing a debrief. So by the time I arrived, the site had a reputation. I wasn't there for the monolith. I want to be clear about that. I was there because Mairead Ossel, who ran the dig's logistics crew, needed 4 extra hands to clear the rubble the Tessavar people had left when they pulled out in a hurry. Rock chips, broken core sample tubes, a collapsed scaffolding rig on the north face of the trench, 2 weeks of work, maybe 3, and then I'd move on to the wheat harvest at the Callan Flats 60 kilometres east. Mairead was a careful woman, 40-ish, sundark, the kind of person who spoke in short sentences and expected you to keep up. She walked me down the canyon ramp on my first morning, past the researchers who were still there, 3 of them, from a small university I'd never heard of, doing documentation work because there was nothing left to do at the site, and she pointed at the base of the monolith and said, "Start there. Pile the chips on the flat side of the trench. Don't touch the stone." I said I wouldn't. The monolith was something. I'd heard descriptions and seen the survey images they broadcast on the colony feeds, but images don't carry the weight of the thing. 30 meters of black stone, smooth as polished glass except for the glyphs carved so precisely you could see each line was deliberate, each curve exact. It had been half buried when the first survey teams found it, and they'd spent months clearing the lower 12 meters. The base was wider than I'd expected, maybe 4 meters across, and the canyon walls on either side were close enough that standing at the base felt like standing in a doorway designed for something much larger than a person. I spent the first 3 days clearing rock chips. Honest work, the kind I know: bend, lift, carry, pile. The researchers watched me sometimes. One of them, a young man with a tablet he never put down, asked me on the second afternoon if I'd heard of the founding myths of the Veth colony. I told him I'd heard them in school, same as everyone. He nodded like that wasn't quite what he meant and went back to his notes. On the 4th day, I found the scaffolding rig. It was half buried under a fall of loose stone from the Tessavar drill work, wedged against the south face of the trench about 3 meters from the monolith's base. Getting it clear meant working in close, tighter than Mairead's instruction had accounted for, and I used a pry bar to lever out the anchor stones one at a time. The 4th anchor was stubborn. I got the bar under it, put my weight on the handle, and the stone shifted. Then the bar skipped sideways and I went down hard. I said my palm hit the monolith. That's true. It also hit at a point between 2 glyph lines, in a section of the surface the researchers' documents later told me had been studied and photographed approximately 1,200 times over the preceding months. Nobody had touched it barehanded. There were protocols about that, gloves required, no direct skin contact with the artifact. I hadn't been briefed on those protocols, because I was a rubble clearance hire and nobody had expected me to get that close. I felt the cold first. The stone was cold the way deep space is cold, not the cold of shade or of winter, but the cold of something that has been away from warmth for a very long time. And then, under my palm, a vibration. Low, steady, like a word being formed at a frequency below hearing. I got my feet under me and started to push myself upright. I should have pulled my hand back immediately. I didn't, because I was focused on not falling again and because, honestly, the vibration felt, it's hard to say this without sounding like a fool, like it was talking to me. Not in words. More the way you feel a door unlocking before you hear the mechanism. The first glyph lit 30 centimeters above my hand. A blue-white line, precise as a cut, tracing a loop I had no name for. Then the one beside it. Then the one below my palm. They came fast after that, a cascade moving upward from the base, each glyph igniting in sequence, the light climbing the monolith's face the way water climbs a wick. I heard Mairead say something behind me. Then I heard nothing, because the sound the monolith was making now was too large for ordinary sound to share space with it. I stood up. I kept my hand on the stone because pulling it away felt wrong in the same way that breaking a circuit feels wrong, like the current needed to complete before I could let go. The light had reached the midpoint of the monolith, 20 meters up, and the canyon walls were lit blue-white, and the three researchers were standing very still at the edge of the trench with their mouths open, and Marate was on her comm calling someone, her voice fast and level the way people get when they're frightened but won't show it. A fourth researcher arrived at the canyon rim. Then 2 Directorate scouts who'd been doing a routine survey pass and picked up the monolith's energy signature on their equipment. They came down the ramp fast, and then they stopped, because the light was at the top now, and the monolith was doing something to the air around it. Not heat, not pressure, but a quality of attention, the way a room changes when someone in it has decided to speak. I have been asked many times since that morning what I was thinking in those seconds. I wasn't thinking. I was standing with my hand on 14,000 years of silence and watching it end, and there was no thought equal to that. The voice came from the stone itself, not from any speaker, not from any mechanism that the researchers, who catalogued everything afterward, could identify. It came from the material of the thing, the way a bell sound comes from the bell. It said, "The Foundation remembers its own." 5 words, in a language that wasn't any language spoken on Vetha's Landing or in the Tessavar Union or in the Directorate's territories, but that I understood, which is a thing I have not been able to explain to anyone's satisfaction, including my own. I understood it the way you understand cold when you feel it. Not translated. Just known. I took my hand from the stone. The glyphs stayed lit, every one of them, all 30 meters, burning blue-white in the canyon air. The monolith did not go quiet again. It has not gone quiet since. Marate lowered her comm. The young researcher with the tablet had sat down on the trench floor because his legs had decided they were done. The Directorate scouts were looking at each other with the careful look people wear when they are trying to figure out what they just saw and whether their careers will require them to pretend they didn't see it. I picked up the pry bar and set it against the trench wall. The scaffolding anchor was still wedged. I'd come back to it after a rest. One of the Directorate scouts found her voice first. She asked me what I'd done. I told her I'd tripped. She asked me what the monolith had said. I said I wasn't sure I'd heard it right. That was not entirely honest. But I wasn't ready to say it aloud to a Directorate scout whose faction had spent 6 weeks trying to crack the thing open and walked away with nothing. The words weren't hers. I wasn't sure yet what they were, or whose they were, except that they were addressed to me and not to her. The researchers came to me over the following 2 days with questions I couldn't answer. Their linguists ran the recorded audio through 7 translation matrices and got no match. Their historians pulled the founding records of Vetha's Landing, the colony's original survey team, the first settlers, the family lines that had worked the ground for 4 generations, and began cross-referencing. The young man with the tablet sat across from me in Marate's side office and asked me, carefully, if I knew anything about my father's family. I knew what most farm hands know about their fathers. He'd worked the East Fields on the Durst estate 2 worlds back, same as his father before him. Crop work. Ground work. The kind of work that doesn't leave records the way wars or scholarship or title holding does. The historian asked if I knew how far back the Durst line went. I didn't. He showed me what they'd found. I won't recount all of it here, because most of it is in the academic reports that have been published since, and because some of it I still don't fully understand. The short version. The founding records of Vetha's Landing contain a list of the original survey crew, the people who first broke ground on this world before the settlers arrived. The list is fragmentary. One family name is legible, and it's a name the linguistic analysis says is a phonetic ancestor of a name that appears in the monolith surface text. In a glyph sequence they'd photographed 1,200 times and never decoded. The name, in the colony's oldest orthography, reads something close to Durst. I sat with that for a while. The historian waited, which I appreciated. The word the monolith had spoken, foundation, means something specific in the records they've since decoded. It isn't a building. It's a role. The people who broke ground on new worlds before the colonies came. The survey crews, the clearers, the ones who worked the raw stone before the scholars and the soldiers and the Warlord-funded expeditions arrived. The founders, the stone's own records call them, were people who made things grow. People who knew how to move rock and make land ready. Farm hands. The first humans to touch a new world were farm hands. The monolith had been waiting 14,000 years for one of them to come back. I finished my contract at the dig site. 3 more weeks of rubble clearing, the scaffolding rig, the drill residue from the Tessavar platforms, A collapsed retaining wall on the South Trench. Honest work. Ma paid me fairly and didn't say much about what had happened, which I respected. I went to the Callan Flats for the wheat harvest, same as I'd planned. The work was the same work. Bend, lift, carry. The wheat didn't care what the monolith had said. Neither did the soil. Neither, if I'm being truthful, did I, in the way I'd expected to. The knowing settled into me the way the cold of the stone had. Not sudden, not dramatic, but persistent. Something that doesn't leave once it's found you. 14,000 years of silence, ended by a man catching himself with his bare hand on his way to the ground. I think about the scholars who came before me, with their drill platforms and their scan equipment and their academic protocols. I think about Varric's son and his 200 soldiers and the 14 pieces of heavy equipment the monolith turned to scrap without a word. I think about the Directorate fleet running 6 weeks of every scan in their catalogue. And I think about the monolith waiting. Not angry. Not impatient. Just waiting, the way a piece of ground waits for someone who knows what they're doing to finally come along and break it open. The foundation remembers its own. I figure that makes 2 of us now.